Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, desolate, serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, banker scum, yet again. Hello, welcome, I'm a useful idiot, and today, go back to the USA to talk about banker scum. And in this case, it's an important story. The story actually came out several months ago, but I always wanted to cover it because it's a very important story. It answers a very important question. And the question that a lot of people have asked, including myself over the years, is how is it that all these extremely highly paid corporate heads and bankers and hedge fund guys and these lawyers, why don't they go into government service? They take a huge hit in their salary. They make a mere pittance compared to what they make in their regular vocations, and certainly I don't think anyone's naive enough to believe that they actually just want to do public service. So there's got to be more to it. And the story that came out answers a lot of these questions about how there is a lot more to it. And basically it boils down to the banks pay their employees to go work for the government. And so in other words, we have a bunch of paid spooks. Our government's full of paid spooks from the banks. So this goes a long way in explaining, first of all, why these highly paid individuals leave these high-paying jobs to go into government service, but it also explains how our government is captivated by bankers, by these corporate scum. And certainly they are the candidates who have the most experience, but the fact that they're on the payroll of the banks going in there, whose interests do you think they're going to serve, particularly because a lot of times these guys leave government service and go right back to where they were before, or a few notches above, or for some other element of the competition. But so it turns out that this practice has received attention recently because Antonio Weiss, a former investment banker for Lazard, and of course we remember Lazard because that's the group that was recently hired by both the Ukraine and Greece to negotiate their bailouts, reconfiguring. And so anyway, now this Antonio Weiss, former investment banker from Lazard, is now a counselor to Jack Lew, our United States Treasury Secretary, U.S. Treasury Secretary. But when Antonio Weiss left Lazard, he was paid $21 million to go into government work and paid in deferred compensation. And so that brings up another interesting thing, is that a lot of these guys get deferred compensation. That way they can circumvent a lot of laws as far as conflicts of interest and the like. So they get deferred packages, and it varies. Sometimes it's stock options, sometimes it's preferred stock, sometimes it's a bonus. Apparently with Goldman Sachs, there's one huge lump cash payment. And so these groups use various methods, and part of the way they sweeten the pie is that if an officer leaves one of these banks early, of course a lot of his portfolio and his stock options and everything are tied to time, so they have to be timely, and a lot of these restrictions for early collections on bonuses and stock option profits and restricted stock awards are waived when they get into government work. So that's another way they basically bribe these workers to go into government work and essentially work for the bank while they're in the government. We know that's what they're doing. A good example of just what I've just brought up, for example, Antonio Weiss is the counselor to Jack Lew, our U.S. Treasury Secretary, and he's involved in this. And Jack Lew himself got a big financial reward from Citigroup and also New York University to go into government work. And he's in charge of the United States Treasury. And so once again, do you think there's going to be any conflicts of interest there? So normally a lot of these bonuses might ordinarily be forfeited with leaving the company, but like I say, this is all an exception for government, or for bankers going into government work. Morgan Stanley, for example, they say, quote, in their literature that, quote, any government department or agency, regulatory agency, or other public service employment So these banks and corporations leave the spectrum wide open as to who they'll pay to go into various sectors, because they know that they can peddle that influence and garner that influence, whether it's a government department or an agency, or certainly a regulatory agency. So then, once again, that also explains why we have these problems with oversight and regulatory agencies like the SEC. I mean, if they're all going to be loaded with bankers who are being paid bonuses and deferred payments and the like, essentially still being on the payroll for the banks they're supposed to be overseeing. We've seen that examples of that time and time again, of that very thing, where the regulatory agencies are ineffective because they're all banker insiders, the proverbial wolf being hired to watch the hen house. And the Blackstone Group, a private equity firm, for example, has one too. And so, like I say, this is huge banks as well as hedge funds and corporations. And Blackstone has stipulated that the executives, quote, will forfeit all unvested partnership units once they are no longer in our employment. However, an officer who leaves our firm to accept specified types of government positions will continue to vest in units as if he had not left our firm during the period of government service, unquote. And I think that's a very, very telling paragraph right there, because it essentially spells out that essentially these people are still on the payroll of these hedge funds and banks while they're in government service. Because at the end of that paragraph, he says that they will continue to vest in units as if he had never left our firm during the period of government service. So it kind of looks like tandem employment for me. J.P. Morgan, much like Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, they have the same thing: reward those who go into local, state, and federal. And unlike some of the other banks, actually J.P. Morgan will also pay you if you want to run for election, or either an elected or an appointed office. So if you want to even run for a position, they will reward you for running for office. So that takes it to another whole level. And a lot of this systems that they obviously are circumventing now are because officers are often, like I mentioned earlier, officers are often restricted from early collections of bonuses and stock options and profits, or restricted stock awards, all because of a 2004 tax law. And that tax law was a result of Enron paying $53 million in accelerated payments and bonuses when they knew that things were going to flame. And it also is a result of previous scandals that are similar to that with Boeing in the early 80s. But this is an extremely nefarious practice, and it makes a lot of things about how the bankers control our government clear. It makes a lot of things about the disparity in pay and motivation, why these big corporate banker guys can take these jobs that pay so much less to theoretically serve the public, when actually they're using it to milk the public. Their real masters, the banks. And it explains a lot about the revolving door, explains a lot about why these people are coming in and out of the government all the time. And in spite of what these leaders say, the Obama administration is a great example. Of course, when he campaigned, Obama promised that they wouldn't have all these bankers or these conflicts of interest and people in the government. And then Barack Obama practically set an all-time record. And I'll attach a list below of all the Goldman Sachs people serving in the Obama administration. Interestingly enough, 90% of the time, I have this link to Fire Dog Lake. It has this list, and I was going to use some of the examples in the list. But 90% of the time, using Google and that link, I can't bring it up. And so Google seems to be restricting access to this list. But I'll put the link below anyway. But it just, once again, goes to show not only do we have this heinous practice of bankers sitting in corporate heads and hedge fund managers essentially being on their previous employer's payroll while they're in the government, serving their true masters. And so there it is. Banker scum. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.